Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. I am Commissioner Megan Gilman. It's 1 p.m. on March 31st, 2026, and I'll get us started for this Commissioner Information meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Eric Blank, Chair of the Commission, and thanks to you and the team for putting this together. Looking forward to it.
Good afternoon, Tom Plant, and yeah, looking forward to this. This is a great information meeting. Thanks for pulling it together.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much. I also just wanted to thank Liz Bourget for helping us get this all going from the Commission staff. She was instrumental in the research and coordination with our panelists today. So thanks to you, Liz. And so today we have an opportunity to learn about several demand response and demand flexibility programs from some utilities across the country. And as we see costs on the system rapidly increase, especially to add new capacity, the Commission's keenly focused on ensuring our utilities are identifying and pursuing opportunities to optimize use of the grid to provide the best value for all utility customers. These efforts could enable us to provide increasingly clean electricity to more load types, including increases in loads for vehicles and building heating, to reduce indoor pollutants, exterior or outdoor emissions, and provide customers with opportunities to adopt newer, more efficient technologies. And this transition has the potential to save all ratepayers money by increasing the use of the grid, including during times when usage is not currently high. However, if these loads add stress to the system at times when it's already at peak, instead these loads could lead to increased costs across the system. This is especially critical now as we've seen recent increases in costs to add new generation, as well as increases to the cost of new transmission and distribution across the system. So the timing and controllability of these loads as a central feature of a modern grid is crucial in our future planning of a system that works well and optimizes costs for everyone. So given this, the Commission was interested in learning more about different demand response and demand flexibility programs and incentives going on at utilities around the country. So we have with us, 5 different panelists representing 3 utilities to provide us some information on several different programs. And our first programs are at Pacific Gas and Electric. And so we'll hear from Stephanie Wong and Trevor Udwin, sorry if I messed that up, on the Smart Rate and Save programs that you'll have going on there. Before we get started, just for my colleagues, we probably have a little bit of buffer after each of these presentations, emphasis on a little bit. So if you have kind of a burning question for those panelists at that time, we probably have a little bit of time before we move on to the next. And then we have a block of time, 45 minutes at the end, for more commissioner questions, if that works for you. All right, so Ms. Wong, would you like to get us started?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
We can. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, and I'm seeing your slides.
Okay, thank you. And then thank you, Liz, for coordinating and then help me driving my presentation as well. So good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Stephanie Wong, and I'm a senior program manager on the demand response team at Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to participate on this panel. I will say that this is my first time presenting on Smart Rate in a regulatory space. So to begin, I'll be talking about PG&E's Smart Rate program, including its purpose, structure, and design, and how it's been implemented in California. And then next slide, please. All right, so PG&E's Smart Rate program is a voluntary residential critical peak pricing program. The goal is to help customers lower their summer electricity costs while also ensuring conservation during periods when California's grid is under the most stress. Structurally, Smart Rate is an overlay on a customer's existing electric rate. Customers stay on their underlying rate tariff, and Smart Rate applies event-based charges and bill credits on top of that. It's important to note that this is a behavioral program. there is no direct control over customer usage. And then you'll also see the term Smart Day referenced and used interchangeably during this presentation. A smart day is simply a smart rate event day that's called when electricity demand on the grid is expected to be especially high, most often occurring during the summer months in California. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. In 2006, Smart Rate was initially approved as a voluntary residential critical peak pricing program with a focus on customer choice and behavioral response rather than direct load management. The program objectives also aligned with the California Public Utilities Commission goals to reflect system cost and encourage demand flexibility. As you can see, over time, the program has been refined through subsequent commission actions, including updates to the event structure in 2015, customer credit methodology in 2019, and standardization and implementation of new event hours in 2021 and 2022 to better align with California's system peak hours. The current operational and customer-facing roles are codified in the Smart Rate program tariff. Okay, thank you. So Smart Days are called on especially hot and high demand days and can occur on any day of the week, including holidays. The number of Smart Days called each year is limited to 15, but a minimum of 9 events is required. Customers are notified ahead of time so they can plan to reduce or shift their usage during the higher price event window from 4 to 9 p.m. As mentioned earlier, Smart Rate is an opt-in program that is available to bundled service residential customers on specific electric rate schedules and also requires a smart meter for participation. Customers not eligible for Smart Rate include those taking service through direct access, certain master meter customers, customers on our NEM 1 and NEM 2 rates, or have standby configurations. Community Choice Aggregator or CCA customers are not eligible for Smart Rate. This is because Smart Rate is tied to PG&E's generation service, whereas CCA customers receive generation from their aggregator rather than PG&E. So therefore, PG&E does not have the authority to apply Smart Rate pricing or credits to those customers. Additionally, dual participation in Smart Rate and other demand response programs are generally not permitted. This is in order to avoid overlapping incentives and support accurate evaluation of our program impacts. The primary exception is a limited population of legacy smart thermostat customers participating in PG&E's Smart AC program who were allowed to continue dual participation under prior commission approved program transitions in 2018. So for Smart Days, they are dispatched on a system-wide day-ahead basis using available forecasts rather than same-day conditions. Dispatch decisions are informed primarily by forecasted weather and expected system demand. Additional dispatch considerations include active public safety power shutoffs, known as PSPS. I believe Colorado has those as well, and enhanced power line safety settings, known as EPSS. As shown on the left side of the screen, the primary trigger for our events is based on a 5-station average, temperature average, which includes locations throughout our service territory. There are also different temperature thresholds for non-holiday weekdays, weekends, and holidays, along with alternate triggers listed in the second box, which support program operations when needed. Over the course of the summer season, the non-holiday weekday temperature trigger can be adjusted to help ensure the program stays within its annual minimum and maximum number of events. This provides flexibility to respond to actual weather patterns while also balancing our system needs and providing a good customer experience. So with that context on how Smart Days are determined and managed over the season, the next slide will show how customers are notified when a Smart Day is called. So once a Smart Day is dispatched, customers are notified no later than 4 p.m. the day before the event. This advance notice is intended to give customers time to plan and adjust their usage if they choose. Customers receive notifications through the contact methods that they've selected, which include text messages and or emails. On the slide, you can see examples of the text message and email notifications that customers receive, which clearly identify the upcoming Smart Day and also reminds customers of the event window. In addition to direct customer notifications, event information is also posted publicly. Both PG&E's main website and the program webpage display banners when a Smart Day is called. So this provides just another channel for customers to confirm event details. And they're also able to reach out to our call center operations with any program or event related questions, since we have a dedicated support line. All right, so this slide summarizes how Smart Rate impacts a customer's bill and how the incentive structure works. On a Smart Day, customers see higher prices during the designated event hours, which reflect the higher cost of electricity during periods of peak system demand. In exchange for being exposed to those higher event prices, customers receive bill credits that are designed to reward reduced usage during those hours. The incentive is behavioral. Customers who are able to shift or reduce usage during Smart Days can lower their overall summer bill. So we can go ahead and walk through how Smart Rate charges and credits work on a Smart Day. As mentioned, the event window is from 4 to 9 p.m. During those hours, any electricity a customer uses is charged an additional 60 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the Smart Day high price charge, as noted by the single asterisk in that first column. So outside of that window, customers don't pay the Smart Day charge. Instead, they'll be receiving credits. There are two types of credits shown in the table. Those are in that middle column and the right-hand side column. And these credits are only applicable for bill periods in which at least one Smart Day occurs. First, there's the non-high price period credit, which applies to electricity used outside those 5 event windows, 5 event hours on a Smart Day. And that credit is about 0.006 cents per kilowatt hour, and it's multiplied by the number of Smart Days in the bill period. Second, there is the Smart Rate participation credit, which is on that last column on the right. This is a smaller credit, about 0.002 cents per kilowatt hour, and it's applied to the same set of usage, which is all non-high price usage on Smart Days and all usage on days in that bill period that are not declared as an event day. So with these two credits, they are applied broadly across the bill period to help offset the higher Smart Day charges. The structure is designed to reward customers for shifting or reducing their usage during those critical peak hours, while also protecting them from bill volatility overall. One other important piece about Smart Rate is that the program offers bill protection for new customers. The bill protection participation period is the customer's first full summer and any partial preceding summer on the program. This means if the customer would have paid more on Smart Rate than they would have on their otherwise applicable rate, the difference is credited back to them. This allows customers to try the program without the risk while they learn how Smart Days work and how their usage patterns respond. So taken all together, the higher price event window, the bill credits, and bill protection, they're designed to encourage conservation when the grid is under the most stress, while also giving customers the opportunity to benefit financially and provide a safeguard as they adjust to the program if they're new. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. So Smart Rate is evaluated annually using methods consistent with the California Demand Response Load Impact Protocols, which estimates both ex post and ex ante impacts for the program. So this table summarizes observed Smart Rate ex post load impacts over the past several program years. Across the years shown, participation has remained relatively stable, averaging just over 47,000 customers. And at an aggregate level, Smart Rate delivers consistent system benefits during events. On average, we're observing about 5.5 megawatts of load reduction during Smart Days. While considered modest in scale in comparison to our other demand response programs in our portfolio, these impacts reflect a purely behavioral response across a residential population without any smart technology providing direct load control. On a customer or per customer basis, The response is also relatively consistent year over year. The average customer reduces just above 1/10 of a kilowatt during event hours, which corresponds to roughly a 4.7% in load reduction. The table also highlights the conditions under which these impacts occur. The typical smart day temperatures are in the low to mid 90s, which show that these reductions are achieved during periods of high temperatures and system loads. You'll notice that program year 2025 results are not included here, as the report will not be filed until tomorrow. However, based on observations and analysis, program year 2025 performance is actually tracking very similarly to program year 2024 results. And overall, the results show that SmartRate produces stable and predictable load reductions during elevated conditions, driven entirely by customer behavior and price response. And then lastly, I'll share about how SmartRate is funded and why it remains cost effective. From a budget perspective, SmartRate is funded through our general rate case proceedings, and program costs are forecasted and recovered through rates as part of PG&E's broader revenue requirement planning. The program itself doesn't have a standalone pool of authorized dollars. Instead, costs are tracked within the appropriate major work category. And importantly, SmartRate is designed to be revenue neutral. Incentives paid to our customers are offset through rate design rather than creating incremental revenue impacts. In terms of what we're spending on, the primary cost categories are pretty limited. They include program administration, customer communications and event notifications, as well as measurement and evaluation costs to ensure the program's performance is accurately captured each year. We don't have any ongoing marketing, automation, or third-party integration that's required, which helps keep our overall program costs low. That leads to why SmartRate continues to matter from a cost effectiveness standpoint. The program is highly targeted. It focuses on the highest cost system hours when demand reductions deliver the most value. Events are limited in number, which reduces customer fatigue and supports sustained participation over time. Operationally, SmartRate is much simpler than other demand response programs with lower implementation and annual maintenance costs. And finally, it complements our time of use rates and other demand flexibility tools, providing a reliable load management option without duplicating functionality or adding unnecessary complexity. So taken all together, SmartRate delivers peak load value at relatively low cost and maintains revenue neutrality while supporting broader system and rate design objectives at PG&E. So that concludes the SmartRate presentation, and then I'll open up my remaining time to the commissioners for any questions. And I apologize if you can hear my dog barking in the background.
No, you're great. And we very much appreciate your willingness to present. And I certainly could not tell it was the first time you presented on this topic. Very well done. Appreciate it. Any burning questions right now before we move on to our other PG&E panelists? And Ms. Wong, you'll be able to stick around until the end, right? So we can
yes, I will be here.
Excellent. Great. Well, if that works, Trevor, maybe we'll move on to you.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Well, this is going to be a bit like going from a classical performance to the rodeo. It's hard to follow Stephanie. And, I work really on the grid edge and thinking about very new programs. My name is Trevor Udwin, and I work on our load management solutions team here at PG&E. And we're really focusing on how we think about behind the meter resources and load shaping for grid services, specifically distribution and transmission needs. And I'll go over that a little bit today. But just first of all, I'd like to say you guys are, the Colorado Commission is officially the first public presentation on this. This is a pilot that was run this summer. And we are publishing a report either this Friday or next week. So this is a bit of a sneak preview to some of the results from our summer's effort. You might hear me say the words AC/DC. This was an EPIC project, which is a publicly funded project through our EPIC program here in California. And the title of this pilot in our EPIC project was ACDC Aggregated Customers on Distribution Circuits. And so it is a nod to the band. So you might see a picture of them at some point here. For our customers, we changed the name to Seasonal Aggregations of Versatile Energy. So it's a soup of various words that basically say distribution grid service program. So thanks, Liz, for the invitation, and really a pleasure to be here with you today. Let's hop on in to our first slide here, and I'll start to give you guys a bit of an idea of how we designed this pilot and ran the test this summer. As I mentioned, our objective is to create a distribution grid services virtual power plant. That term is oft used. This is sending signals to behind the meter resources for a distribution need. And I'll go over that a bit more. But for the purposes of this summer, the behind the meter resources that we were targeting were behind the meter batteries and behind the meter smart panels. So I'll talk a bit about how we selected those and why it is that we selected those for our first trial. As I mentioned, we wanted to reflect the local needs at the distribution level and deliver shaping instructions to these aggregated resources at these locations to understand whether these resources could shape to the need. So that's really the basis for this pilot, is can we deliver the shape that we're looking for in these aggregations. We also wanted to demonstrate that these technologies that we had selected can follow those shapes with the level of precision that we could then deliver to our distribution planners. That's really essential to this whole effort. We want to be able to provide a value to planners to say, this is the precision that you can expect from these resources at these times of days, this time of month, and you can rely on those resources moving forward in your planning processes. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we want to prove out these resources to the level that they can be considered planning resources. All right, let's go to the next slide. So what is the challenge that we have at the distribution grid, and why is it that we think that aggregated resources can support or meeting the needs of the grid? Well, the challenge I've displayed here in these tables, what you're looking at here is the red coloring on the two tables represent hours of overload. The top table is a randomly selected feeder, and the bottom table is a randomly selected substation. So I'll come back to these tables in a moment. Why we're looking at this is that we understand that our grid is very diverse, as is, I'm sure, the grid in Colorado. We have all sorts of climate differences across our territory. We have load shaping differences across our territory. We have assets that span 100 years across our territory. So the diversity is ample, as you can imagine. And overloading can occur in multiple hours and for multiple stretches. And we'll look at that here in one of these tables in a moment. The shapes are varied, and the hours that they vary are different, and can even in one asset, in one feeder, for example, can vary from year to year, depending on new load and various other changing circumstances. And so one thing that we really want to understand is, as we start to look at the needs at the distribution level, the needs at the generation level, which Stephanie just referred to, and the needs at the transmission level, where do those needs align, and how can we address the alignment of those needs with these behind the meter resources? And if they're not aligned, what does that mean? For example, if you service the distribution need, are you also able then to service the transmission need with behind the meter battery aggregations? These are the big questions we have. So we look at this overloading table here, and this is a really good example. On the top, you have a feeder that's overloading for multiple hours, right? So what we're looking at here are months of the year on the x-axis and hours of the day on the y. And you can see that for 3 months of the year, you're getting a peak of multiple hours on that feeder. Is that something that behind the meter resource aggregation could support? That's a big question we have. Below, you're looking at a transmission substation, and you have a much shorter overload on the substation than you had on the feeder. But as you would expect, given the substation supplies many more customers, that overload is quite spiky. You have over 7 megawatts of overload during some hours of the day. And so how do we think about these in conjunction with one another, and can these behind the meter resources address these challenges? I've overlaid below just a very basic graphic of what the generation looks like. We all know here this is a sophisticated group, but just to remind us that we've got a lot of sun during the day, a lot of solar, so we may very well be able to address these needs if we have the right and proper resources behind the meter to store and deliver on that need. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we decided let's grab a hold of some of these resources and start sending them distribution signals. We worked with various partners for this pilot. Sunrun delivered over 1,000 batteries to the pilot. NextEra Energy, who has a subsidiary called Everbright here in California, they're a battery and solar installer and operator, delivered over 600 batteries. And we worked with a local company based here out of San Francisco. You guys may have heard of them. They are national. They're called SPAN. They have various products. One of their products is a smart panel. This can be used as the main panel for a home or a sub panel for the home. And this panel has the ability to, or capability to, limit load at the home level, or whatever load is on the panel specifically, by circuit. And so I can go into more detail on exactly how their technology works, but essentially we wanted to test these two technologies for some very clear reasons. One, they're very different from one another. A customer with a battery may not be aware of limiting at their home, just because the energy from the battery is supplying them with their needs. Whereas a smart panel is a limiting technology. However, given their ability to break that into circuits and allow the customer to select, have a hierarchy for what they would want limited when the need arises, we wanted to understand sort of how the customer impact would be different. So I do just want to, I know that Colorado has, I believe, still net metering. I could be wrong, but we've, in California, we've gone from NEM2 to a net billing tariff. We chose to use all batteries, all customers on NEM2 for this, because the NEM2 shape is a sort of more basic shape that follows the TOU period. And so what we had found in the state of California is that sometimes you have batteries exporting as soon as that TOU period opens and maybe missing the real value to the grid in other periods within that TOU period. And so we saw a lot of extra juice to be squeezed in NEM2. And so that was really where we focused the battery customers for this pilot. And then I just would mention, we did provide to the aggregator, so the companies, for each battery that they delivered, and they had to meet certain rigor with the battery throughout the pilot to receive the funding. We did provide $400. That is not an indication of any value that we perceived through this pilot. It was simply a participation agreement that we wanted to make sure that they were able to adjust their customer's battery without impacting their customer negatively, and have that payment there to support that and to make sure that they could bring lots of batteries into the pilot. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So we went through a 5-step process. I know we don't have a lot of time today, and I'm going to try to keep honest to my time. So I'm really going to focus on number 4 here, but let's just cover the gamut. So our process was, we wanted to target specific grid locations for testing. We wanted to develop accurate predictive models by each location that we had selected. We then wanted to automate the communication and the forecast dispatch to these aggregators so that there was a smooth transition. The days of, paging or calling folks are over. We wanted to make sure that this was a very automated process. We wanted to assess the ability of these DERs to follow that dispatch precisely, which I'm going to get into. And then we went in, after we had set all of that up, we went into a 2-month beta testing phase. And the goal here was to say, hey, we're not trying to trick anyone. We really want to build these processes out and get as prepared as we can for the summer so that we can get those load shapes of behind the meter aggregations to meet our signals as best possible. So that's what we did. And we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So here you can see, I know it's a little small, I apologize for that, but you can see the locations that we selected for the feeders and the substations. We ended up selecting 15 feeders and 9 substations for this pilot, just simply based, in this case, on where we saw a lot of behind the meter resources that we could test and where we saw diversity for the aforementioned diverse landscape of our territory. So there were several variables in selecting the feeders. Those were really the main two. We did end up delivering 14 megawatt hours of battery capacity across those batteries and across the groups. I won't get into it much because I know we're time constrained, but in addition to the real life feeders and substations, we did some clustering. So I looked at a 2035 forecast and said, what if we use this feeder but under 2035 conditions and had batteries respond to that? That was a bit separate from the rest of them were real feeders with batteries responding to them. But I just wanted to kind of give an extreme scenario there, so I can talk more about that if there's interest there. But you can see here behind the feeders how many sites there are, sites being a home, how many batteries there are. We have about 1.7 batteries, 1.5, 1.7 batteries per home in these in PG&E territory. So yeah, this was our test sample, and we can go on to the next slide, please. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I'm happy to provide more detail on this. There will be lots of detail in the report on this. The automation process, while fairly straightforward, is a hard thing to run properly. There's a lot of data going back and forth. Obviously, it has to be very secure data. And the success of a pilot like this is our ability to predict what the need at these feeders and substations will be. And so our predictive modeling was a cornerstone to making sure that this was a successful pilot. And you can see here that we use SCADA data and the weather observations for each of the weather stations across our territory. Happy to go into more on that, but suffice to say, we pulled in some experts to help us do this, and we were very pleased with how it was run. So let's go on to the next slide. This is somewhere I want to spend a little time, and just Liz, please keep me honest. I think I have 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I think if we can wrap up within 10, that would be awesome.
Okay, great. So I mentioned to you one of the real driving factors in building this pilot is that to date, when I walk to a colleague of mine, a distribution planner, and say this behind the meter resource can do XYZ, they'll nod their head, and say, prove it to me. And so how do we start to really prove and put the rubber to the road on how these resources behave under the conditions that we're seeing on our grid? And so we decided to use these values and these metrics to evaluate our resources. And I've tried to use this visualization here to try to help us. We're going to go through, I'll show you the results on the Breyer score, which is to say, basically, if we send you a signal, you aggregator with all of your batteries, will all of them receive the signal and respond? Not respond correctly, just respond. The short answer there was we had like 99.8% response, so very high response rate. The next thing is, okay, well, if they respond, are they responding accurately to what we're sending them? So basically, do they over or under deliver, or do they deliver perfectly? So what you can see here is the resources are clustered in one area, but they may not be clustered precisely on where we want them to be, right? So this is an average. And finally, the mean, there may be some far outliers, but as long as the mean delivers on the bullseye, you may have what we call precision there. And so I'll talk more about how we use these here, but this is how we're thinking about walking over to our planning colleagues and saying, okay, we can meet under these circumstances, we can be consistent, accurate, and precise. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Liz. So I mentioned the beta testing, 2-month beta testing phase. I don't really need to spend much time on this. There was a lot of work done here because this is where you start building those data channels, you start building the communication protocols, and you start pinging batteries and seeing if they're doing what you need them to do. And this was a very interesting part of our testing, simply because we were making some assumptions that we had to change early on. So I was really glad to have the beta testing phase. You can see here that what you're looking at on this chart is the gray dotted line is our signal, right? So essentially, as we see other graphs, this is a very kind of standard signal that we send. This is a 7 p.m. peak where we're saying discharge the batteries at that hour in a bell curve type shape, right? And so we started sending signals like that to our aggregators, nothing surprising to them. By the end of the summer, we went further than we even expected to with our partners, who I was really excited that they were willing to. I was starting to send double fang signals by the end of the summer, just because we had a very cool summer and had some dispatch availability left. So I can talk more about that if we have time. Let's go on to the next slide. This is the consistency that I was talking about. So what you're looking at on the left-hand side are all of the feeders and substations. And what you're looking at below are the dates that we send them signals, and the size of the bubble being how many resources we had responding at that site. So top left, Ashland Avenue, you can see that in early July, we sent them a dispatch, and you can see a decent sized bubble there. So that represents several batteries responded to that signal on Ashland Avenue. So really what you're looking at here is the main takeaway for me here is that we had events across the summer and across all of these resources, and you can see that they're responding. This means that those batteries came online and responded to our dispatch sheet. Let's go ahead to the next slide. This is where it starts to get pretty exciting. You see here, it's almost hard to see our dispatch in Coastal 1. We have 75 batteries there. You can barely see the dispatch signal. It's as you can see below, it's that kind of gray with a gray circle, but it's hard to see because the blue dispatch line is perfectly aligned in this example with the signal that we sent them. So this means that they're hitting the right resource at the right amount of time as we've sent it to them. The state of charge is the orange line. So obviously as the batteries dispatch in the blue, their state of charge goes down. You can see another example of this in Hicks 2101. This is a feeder where it's a slightly more interesting shape. And we see this across the board. You would think these shapes would all look the same. They do not. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So why do we think that they're being precise is really important for our testing of VPPs? And the answer here is that if you look at, on the left-hand side, you look at the test shape. The way we think about this is the blue bars are amount of the resource that is being dispatched. So in the first hour, you have very little battery resource being dispatched. By hour 5, you have a lot being dispatched. And the reason that we wanted to show this, let's take a look at test shape 2 actually first. You have a lot in hour 1, very little in 2 and 3, and it comes back up in 4 and 5. Why is this interesting to us? Well, what we're thinking about here is orchestration. We have programs like the one that Stephanie has just described to you that are already responding to grid needs. In her case, what she described is a bulk system need on a hot day. How can these batteries support grid needs based on current existing programs? So if what we're seeing, let's say in test shape 2, or actually she was presenting more on test shape 1, where you have the cooling, the AC cooling already having an effect in hours 1 and 2. So you're not going to need a lot of that dispatched energy from the battery because that cooling has already taken place. But then all of a sudden the cooling stops having its effect and the need shoots up. The idea is that these batteries can support these less flexible resources. And so the orchestration of resources to bring up our ability to shift megawatts and bring down our cost is really what we're thinking about as we test the battery precision. And let's go to the next slide. I know I only have a couple minutes. So I did mention, I just wanted to show you that, towards the end of the summer, we had not dispatched as much as we had anticipated simply because we had a very cool summer last summer. And so I asked our battery partners, are you willing for me to start sending you some of the craziest shapes that we can find? On the left, you see 24 batteries responding quite incredibly to a double-fanged dispatch that I sent them. You can see that it kicks in the 5 o'clock hour. It goes up through the 7 o'clock hour, and then drops down again through the 9 o'clock hour, and then back up at the 10 o'clock hour. These batteries were able to meet that resource. So you can imagine again, let's say that at the 6 o'clock hour, an existing program kicked in, and the need at that feeder dropped. Well, those batteries can then pull back, right? They're not expressing as much dispatch there. We did find times you can see here where the accuracy diminished, and I'll talk a little bit in our last slide about why we think that is. You can see here that the blue dispatch on the right did not dispatch down to the 30 kW that we had requested in the gray. In fact, it did about half that, but then it picked up pretty well and followed the shape. So you can see there the difference between accuracy and precision. This was quite, I always, it's precise and not accurate in this case. And so I'll talk in the next slide about why we think that happens sometimes. Please note on that table that there are 13 batteries. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now I'm up on 2 minutes, 1 minute here. So as I mentioned, what did we find? We found that batteries overall were consistent. I have values, and this will be in the report, how consistent. Batteries were accurate, with accuracy improving over time. So over the summer, we did find that the accuracy improved, and in larger groups. So I mentioned that last table, there were only 13 batteries. There is a big drop off as you start to diminish the batteries for kind of obvious reasons, but also some of it having to do with the algorithms that we were using. But obviously, when you have more batteries, you have more ability to shape. And same for batteries being precise, although while the accuracy was very explainable for the reasons I mentioned, sometimes the precision was off, and we're still working. There are some areas which will be in the report where we're still working on why there was less precision. There was quite a wide range. Some areas, the aggregators were very precise, and in others, they were pretty far off. And so we want to understand why that is, and we're observing that. I think a lot of it, again, comes down to when you have more batteries, these aggregators are much more able to be precise. Okay, so next steps, we want to look at more saturation. We want to see what the impacts at scale will be. In other words, for this summer, we were really focusing on the shape, the precision, the accuracy, not the impact. If you go in and look and see if SAVE had an impact on these feeders, it's this big. These, we were using as many batteries as we could get a hold of, but we really want more resources behind these feeders. And so one of the next steps is to really get a hold of more resources so that our operators can start to see the impact of shaping these resources. We want to test more DERs. I mentioned, orchestrate more DERs. We've tested 2 this summer, but we'd like to look at how this could work with vehicle to grid, any DER essentially. And then, as I've shown you, how can we really complement existing programs so that these very flexible batteries are supporting sometimes less flexible resources. And I think that's I don't believe I added. I do have, this is, we found different conclusions for the panels versus the batteries. As I mentioned, they're very different technologies. I've been focusing this whole presentation on the batteries, and the report that I mentioned is going to focus on the batteries. I will follow that in 2 weeks with a report on the SPAN panels. And you have this slide, so please feel free to send me any questions. But for time purposes, I'm gonna just leave it there. And there's a lot more to talk about with the panels. So yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Really great, great ending. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and look forward to getting to some questions with you at the end.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. At this time, we'll move on to Con Edison's Smart Charge program, and the EV Smart Charge program presented by Amelia Berman.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm Amelia Berman from the Con Edison e-mobility department, and today I'm going to talk about how we've scaled EV managed charging programs in New York, what problems we're solving, how we've designed the Smart Charge New York to deliver value to both customers and the grid, and basically what we've learned as participation has grown over the years. So today I'm going to focus primarily on Smart Charge New York. It's our residential managed charging program because it provides a real strong world example of EVs operating as flexible demand resources in a dense urban system. So if we go to the next slide, just to kind of give you a little bit of level set context on Con Edison, we serve one of the most complex electric systems in the country. We provide electric service to 3.5 million customers across New York City and Westchester over a very compact geographic footprint. If you've been to New York City, you know there's a lot of skyscrapers and a lot of apartment buildings. 2/3 of our residential customers live in multifamily buildings or mixed use buildings. So that multifamily reality drives everything. Many customers don't have a driveway charger, so charging behavior is actually more varied. And program design has to work for people who charge in multiple places, not just at home. So if we go to the next slide, a little bit more context setting. Transportation electrification is essential to meeting New York's climate goals. In 2017, transportation sector accounted for nearly half of statewide carbon emissions. And the takeaway here is that we can't meet our targets without aggressively electrifying transportation, but aggressively electrifying transportation will unsurprisingly add load to the grid quickly. We've estimated that 2 level 3 DC fast chargers will add approximately the same load as a mid-size apartment building in our territory. But if you think about it, it can take years to build an apartment building, whereas a charger installation can take less than a year. So we really need to figure out a way to manage all of this new load coming onto the grid quickly, and why we need to design programs that align charging behavior with our system needs. So on the next slide, you can see why managed charging is really the key opportunity that shows up to address this need. A New York State study commissioned by NYSERDA and the Department of Public Service described EV charging as the single largest opportunity for grid flexibility. EVs are unique because the vast majority of the time they're parked. That creates a wide window where charging can be shifted with minimal impact on the drivers, as long as the programs are designed correctly. And on the next slide, we're really talking about the big takeaway that we've continued to come back to is that charging has to work both for the customer and also for the grid, or else it's just not going to scale. So from the customer perspective, Smart Charge provides operating cost relief through simple and predictable incentives. I'm a big believer that if you want to engage with people, you want to engage with them when they're buying or leasing their first EV or their first PHEV, and ingrain that grid beneficial behavior early before habits set in that then you're going to have to convince them to kind of change their behavior. From the grid perspective, managed charging supports flexible interconnection, reduces peak stress, improves planning data, and also builds confidence that EV load can be shaped at scale. And that confidence piece is important. It's what allows managed charging to move from like what we originally had as a pilot into our core planning assumptions, which we are now doing. And then on the next slide, we do have a portfolio approach rather than a single program. So for Smart Charge New York, it's a passive program focused on reducing system peak, primarily for residential drivers and fleets using the vehicle telematics. And we really focus on our system peak, which is Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 p.m., June through September. It's a summer peak system where we are. We have another program called Smart Charge Commercial, and that focuses on network peak for commercial charging sites using charging station data or meter data. And that's really focused on the network peak, and that's the period when electricity demand is highest within a specific locational distribution network, as opposed to the system peak. And that can really vary by time period and length of time. So it could match the system peak. It could also be an 8-hour network peak that's ranging from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. It really depends on where you are in the network. And then finally, we have a program called Smart Charge Tech, and that provides funding to enable technologies like load management systems and storage. And we'll offer that to charging station operators that make that flexibility possible, that allows them to participate in the Smart Charge Commercial program. So together, these programs really allow us to address flexibility at multiple levels of the grid and engage with all of the different participants that are touching either electric vehicles and or EV chargers. So on the next slide, I'm going to drill down to Smart Charge New York a little bit deeper. I mentioned this program offers cash incentives to EV drivers for charging during off-peak hours, primarily overnight when the grid has available capacity. The program originally launched in 2017 as a pilot and then was re-released in 2023 with approximately $100 million in funding to give out through the end of 2025. And we received an extension to run through the end of this year. So participants earn a year-round off-peak charging incentive plus a summer peak avoidance incentive for not charging during the system peak during the summer. And we've seen on average approximately $400 is earned per participant. Some folks can earn over $1,000, especially our rideshare or taxi participants who are driving a lot, so they're having to charge a lot. The more you charge off peak, the more you're going to earn. We wanted to ensure that anyone with a BEV or PHEV in our territory could participate in our program. So we've partnered with a vendor that has a wide reach when it comes to vehicle compatibility. And almost all of our participants are participating through telematics as opposed to EV chargers. And again, that goes back to the nature of our territory. We have mostly people that are living in multifamily homes that don't have a dedicated parking spot where they could install an EV charger. So giving them the opportunity to participate through telematics is making our program as accessible as we wanted it to be. And today, about 97% of the EVs registered in our territory can participate in our program. We have the vehicle telematic compatibility through our existing vendor. And that's what's been really critical to drive scale, is making sure that we have that program equity available. And then the last thing I'll mention is that our program is a passive program, meaning we're issuing incentives based on performance after the fact, not actively controlling when folks are charging. And we've actually seen a really compelling response from implementing this program passively as opposed to actively. I'll also mention that folks love to receive their incentives off bill. Instead of opening up their bill every month and seeing what their incentive is, they'll get a notification through Venmo or PayPal. And then they'll see like, hey, I earned money this month by participating in SCNY. And it kind of creates that feedback loop of that grid beneficial behavior that we're looking for. Oh, if I charge off peak, I'm going to earn more money. And then on the next slide, I'm going to talk about kind of what our outreach and enrollment strategy has looked like. And it's really about scaling up and kind of modifying our outreach efforts as we scale. So in 2023, when we first relaunched, we focused on building early credibility through partnering with dealers, fleets, and industry partners. And then in 2024, we shifted towards converting awareness into action by expanding field presence and marketing. And then in 2025 and 2026, we've moved to a more targeted data-driven approach, focusing resources where we saw the highest conversion and the most cost efficiencies for the program. And so this evolution has really allowed us to scale efficiently without overwhelming operations or the customer experience. And to your right, you can see some examples of the marketing collateral that we've developed and deployed through our program. I want to say we did a ton of experimentation. We call it like our no stones unturned approach. And if an outreach method didn't work, we would take that lesson learned, move on, and try something new, which is why we were able to scale as quickly as we were. And on the next slide, diving even deeper, if something did work well, we would actually double down on it and then layer in new strategies on top of that. So on the marketing side, we expanded beyond traditional email and advertising to partnerships with O-Power, Tesla in-app promotions, and others, which helped us reach drivers where they're already engaging, which was really helpful. On the outreach side, we took an all hands on deck approach at kind of key moments. We did a lot of boothing together. We found cold calling was very effective, and then we used contractors to further expand that reach. We leaned heavily into partnerships. So I already mentioned auto dealers, fleets, the Taxi and Limousine Commission, rideshare communities, and even informal driver networks like the WhatsApp groups. I actually have one interesting anecdote. The New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission formally rolled out the Green Rides rule in October of 2023, which requires taxi and rideshare companies to steadily increase their share of trips completed by either zero emission or wheelchair accessible vehicles. So from that initiative that rolled out, we saw about 10,000 new rideshare EV drivers come into our service territory in about Q4 of 2023. So it was important, as this absolute, huge surge in EVs that came into our territory, it's important for us to reach those drivers as quickly as possible and enroll them in the program. So we actually partnered with the Taxi and Limousine Commission and translated our outreach collateral to 10 of the most common languages spoken by TLC members to be able to reach them better, reach them where they are. And we saw a big bump in enrollment from that. I won't spend too much on this slide, but really each of these channels individually moved the needle a little bit. And together, we really saw collectively, they created that sustained momentum that led to the enrollment state that we're at today. So on the next slide, we can see that, the results really speak for themselves. We were able to grow the enrollment to over 30,000 participants by the end of 2025. It spans a wide range of use cases. We're talking about multifamily residents, single family homes, light duty fleets, and as I mentioned, rideshare drivers. 94% of participants report satisfaction with the program, and incentives and convenience consistently rank as drivers' top reasons for participating in our program. And just as importantly, the program has demonstrated that managed charging can scale while remaining well received. That was a really, really, really important element for us as we continue to grow this program. So a big takeaway for us is we're expecting these programs to play a long-term role in grid planning, but we need to make sure that we bring along the customer each step of the way to make sure that they are just as engaged as they are now. And then just to close, I think we've demonstrated that Smart Charge New York and managed charging can be simple, scalable, and impactful. And the programs really need to be designed around real customer behavior and simple price signals. And from our perspective, EVs don't represent just new load, they represent flexible load, and managed charging allows us to kind of unlock that flexibility in a way that cost effectively supports electrification, affordability, and reliability. And that's it for me. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amelia. Can I ask you one clarifying question? Can we go, Liz, it was the slide, I think it's 18, but it shows like the table with the incentives on it. And it shows 10 cents per kilowatt hour incentive. So that's the rate, or that is a deduction from the kilowatt hour rate for charging
That's
during
the incentive amount. It's not a deduction on your bill. We basically determine how much kWh that you've charged between midnight and 8 a.m. and then we multiply that by 10 cents.
Okay, so that is the rate for the energy for charging at that during those hours.
It's not like a deduction off your bill. It's the incentive rate. It's not the cost that you're paying to get charged. It's the incentive that we're paying them. Does that make sense?
No, I'm struggling.
I'm so sorry.
If it's the amount they pay for the kilowatt hour, it sounds like it's not. And it's not a deduction on the kilowatt hour. I'm struggling.
It's not the cost that the customer is paying. It's the incentive amount we are paying the customer. So
okay.
So
you're giving the customer like a credit for
yeah. I mean, it's not a credit, it's a Venmo payment. It's like
an actual payment. Okay.
An actual payment that's completely outside of the customer bill. We actually, because if you think about it, New York City, we're right in the middle of the tri-state area. We have a lot of vehicles that drive in and out of our service territory, especially when you think of commuters coming into Manhattan. So we don't require a customer to be a Con Edison customer in order to participate in our program, which is why we're not doing any kind of on-bill deductions. We're paying them completely separately.
Okay. Yep. That was kind of my understanding. You have these off. These are not people who necessarily have to have a Con Ed account or whatever, but with their vehicle telematics, they participate and then get separate cash payments for this 10 cents a kilowatt hour and the $35 charge.
That's right. So
okay.
Zero
Thank you for helping me
on the
understand.
bill, just off-bill payments.
So they paid whatever they paid at the charging station.
That's
We
right.
give them the 10 cents independent. Okay. Chairman, do you have something quickly?
Yeah, can you go to that last slide again? It looked like you got participation of very nice steep upward curve, 30,000 enrollments. Can you say what the total number of what the universe is? Is that like 1%, 10%, 50%?
It's of electric vehicles and PHEVs in our territory, we have about 100,000 of them. So it's 30% of the EVs and PHEVs in our service territory. Are you talking about light duty vehicles in general? I might have to get back to you on that.
No, but so roughly you've got a 30% participation rate from within 4 or 5 years.
That's right.
Wow, that's helpful. And does that reflect like, so if you had like 500 megawatts of EV demand, have you reduced it by 350 megawatts?
We have started to do that analysis. I can't say for sure right now, but we've started to do that analysis on what the actual impact is going to be on the grid from all of this participation. For us, it was critical to scale the program first, and then estimate what the actual impact would be on the grid. Because if you don't have scale, then you can't really actually have any impact on the grid to begin with. So we're actually going through that effort right now of quantifying.
But there's no reason to believe that if you got 30% participation, it wouldn't reduce peak demand by 30%.
That's right. Yeah, it wouldn't reduce. It's not like a exact 1-for-1.
Thanks, Ms. Berman. Hopefully you can stick around with us until after the next presentation for a Q&A. Appreciate it. Okay, next up we have Holy Cross Energy's Power Plus and Peak Time Payback programs, presented by Sam Whalen and Lisa Reed from Holy Cross. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. Glad to be here. I'm Sam Whalen, the Vice President of Finance. That includes, the purview includes our power supply and programs teams as well. And thank you to Lisa Reed for joining. She's our Energy Programs Manager. And I'll provide just some little bit of background on Holy Cross, some context. Many of you may know some of this information, but I'll give some context in terms of why we do what we do with our programs, and then Lisa will get into the interesting stuff of actual program specifics. So next slide, please. So for scale, we're progressing towards higher degrees of renewables. We've got about 46,000 members in Western Colorado and just under 300 megawatts of peak demand. So to keep that in context when we go into some of the program specifics. Next slide, please. Our board adopted a goal in 2019 of 100% clean energy by 2030. We're progressing towards that and in a way that maintains affordability, safety, reliability. One of the things that you can see from this slide, we have a multi-pronged approach. Clean wholesale power has been a key ingredient in terms of the progress that we've made so far, the local clean energy resources, but we do focus heavily on distributed energy resources, electrification, efficiency, and all of the programs that we have that are member-sided and behind the retail meter. Those all, we view those similarly to our other resources in terms of our progress towards our goals. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've made some progress on the wholesale power side and the clean energy side. A couple notable project additions have been the Bronco Plains 2 wind project. That's a 200 megawatt wind farm on the eastern plains of Colorado. And then also closer to home, we've got a number of solar plus storage projects in the 10 megawatt size range that are interconnected with our distribution system. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're balancing what we call our 4 pillars: affordability, reliability, sustainability, and safety. And when we look at development of programs and management of programs, those are really, we aim to fit those within this framework, making sure that they're progressing and accomplishing goals here. We're proud of what we've accomplished so far, and excited for what we've have coming up in the future. As you switch to the next slide, please, you'll be able to see here, really with the progress of those projects that I mentioned that we added to our portfolio, we're seeing a pretty rapidly changing supply portfolio. So this gives you an idea of a typical month from a supply perspective. You can see the bottom of the stack, we've got some hydro, we've got solar that you can see coming on each day there. And then the green bars are both wind as well as some wholesale energy purchases. And really the story here that I want to leave you with in terms of why programs, why demand response, why load flexibility, it's in a large part due to the changing supply portfolio that we've got here. There's a lot more variability. There's hours where we have too much energy. There's hours where we have almost none. And so we're seeing a lot more variability within our power supply. So emerging concerns or opportunities, maybe I would call it, oversupply. What do we do with excess renewables? How do we ensure we have sufficient resources to meet our load? And we've got continued fuel cost volatility. Winter storms start having larger impacts on natural gas and electric rates than they might have used to. Emerging markets and requests for energy resilience. Then the one I highlighted here is really load flexibility. Load flexibility can't get us all of the way there, but it certainly plays a role here. And if we can modify, you see that red line there is our load. If we can modify our load to help match our supply, that's certainly an important part of the equation for us. Next slide, please. In 2023, we published our power supply roadmap, and this really laid the stage for what's next. We entered into a lot of our bulk system renewable deals that really paved the way for the majority of our renewables. And now at this point that we've got those large resources, as you saw from the chart before, there's not a whole lot more room for large scale resources. There's many hours where the wind fulfills all of our load in certain hours. And so we don't have a need necessarily for bulk system resources. The need is much more smaller in scale, distribution connected resources, monthly, like winter seasonal renewables, for example, energy storage, and then highlighted at the top as well, flexible loads and aggregated DERs are one area that was highlighted from the power supply roadmap as areas both of a need and opportunity. Okay, so next slide, please. And this is where I just wanted to add some context there for where we've come at Holy Cross, where we're going, and like to turn it over now to Lisa Reed, and she can walk you through some of our programs, and we'll do a deeper dive specifically into some behavioral demand response program, as well as some successes we've had on residential storage and how those programs fit in to help our overall supply portfolio and help lower costs for our members as well. Thank you.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you for setting that up so nicely. I wanted to talk here about some of our rate and program options that allow us to facilitate the goals and support the progress that Sam has talked about. Holy Cross has developed programs and tariffs to make it happen. So for the foundation of several programs, including Power Plus, which we're going to talk about today, we added a distributed energy resource service agreement to enable us to recover the costs of the equipment or the installation. For example, our Charge at Home program allows you to pay your charger's installation costs over a 3-year period with no interest after installing your fully rebated EV charger, thus removing all the barriers to charging at home. Another rate option is our distribution flexibility tariff, which allows us to share with our members the benefits of the program, or the device and what it generates. Under Power Plus, this value is the demand reduction from the discharging of the batteries onto the grid. Green Up is a tariff program that has been tested for a future when we can provide value to our members who choose to defer their EV charging or schedule their usage during times of renewable oversupply. We provide a voluntary time of use rate for our members that incorporates the cost of demand and works well for engaged members who want to manage their usage to avoid the evening peak hours. Our Pure program has been a great success, allowing those members who wish to move the needle now to 100% clean energy to invest in that additional clean energy brought onto the grid on their behalf. Now, Peak Time Payback is one of the programs that we do want to talk about today, and it is a demand response program. We provide a signal. A member responds by reducing their usage during the event window, and we pay them a portion of the value of that reduction. If you'll move to the next slide, please. To go into a lot more detail in terms of Peak Time Payback, I want to talk about some of the basics. In order to get the ability to call these events, Holy Cross, with much kudos to Sam, developed a forecasting tool several years ago. We figured if we could predict when the larger system of our wholesale provider was going to reach its peak draw, we could attempt to reduce our usage and thereby reduce the coincidental peak charge we pay each month based on our demand during their system's peak. And that's where the value is going to come in from some of these programs. Our members are going to enroll in the program. They're going to receive notification of the events, and they respond by reducing their usage over the baseline developed depending on the timing of the event. There are some limitations to our tools. Weather normalization is tough given our billing system, and we do make some adjustments for unique loads like snow operations at our resorts. But it has become a very beneficial tool and quite successful in forecasting that peak. So one of the great benefits is that we pay you for what you actually do. So as a member, what you do, you're going to see the results from. Our goal really is to engage that member, to have them think about their usage, and ultimately plan their actions. So we kind of like to say this is a win-win, no-lose program. There's no penalty. If you are unable to respond, or if you don't reduce your usage during the event, no worries, we're going to work together with you next time. But if you do, the benefits are worth it. I can show that on the next slide. The value that we've determined is in the reduction of the demand of power during the event or against our wholesale provider's overall system peak, and it provides for the savings. We've translated that into $1.50 a kilowatt hour for critical events, 75 cents per kilowatt for a high or likely event. And these are far in excess of just the cost of the kilowatt hour. 75 cents, even just for a higher likely event, compared to our 11-cent retail price for our residential members, can make a big difference. And this is a credit on your bill. It's a benefit, something that you see each month based on the actual results of your participation. We call a critical event, and so we're willing to pay more. It's because we're fairly certain of our forecasting and can pay double a normal event. And it works. The numbers are panning out. Even with accounting for errors, basically for us missing that peak event, we have paid out to our Peak Time Payback members over $90,000 in the last 3 years, while saving our entire membership an additional $110,000 on their power supply costs. We've grown over the last years that we've had Peak Time Payback. We have about 3,500 members participating in the program. If you go to the next slide. We do see a lot of advantages in active participation by our members in a program like this. It engages our members in taking steps today to manage their usage, to be aware of their power needs. We recently increased the value of those credits to the 75-cent and $1.50 we showed you because of the success of the program. This program pays for itself, and it benefits not just the individual participating member, but the entire membership. And our larger members like Eagle River Water and Sanitation, they've made some pretty big impacts for the community, not just on their own monthly bill, but for the whole community while participating in peak time payback. I'll have you go to the next slide, please. But no program's perfect, and we do struggle with engagement. Once a member enrolls, how do we keep them engaged and responding? On a typical residential scale, we see excitement at first, and then the participation dwindles. This graph depicts what we're seeing where enrollment is growing faster than the total average response. So how do we turn that around? That's something we're working on. Our programs and our communications teams are really trying to figure out, how do we keep our members engaged over time? How do we keep them excited about managing their usage and seeing those benefits on their bill? So next slide. We've also learned that our reach is minimal. When we look at the top 200 demand creating members, it create, consistently having such a big impact on our demand rate, we need to get more participation. The impact of participation by just a handful of members like Eagle River Water and Sanitation account for a significant amount of the response. So how do we enroll more of these members? Our community relations team right now is reviewing the data and targeting those top members that we've noted here, who really can make our next PTP leaderboard. We do think that there are opportunities in a more instantaneous and transparent measurement and verification method, along with a timely reward review. Maybe something that shows you exactly what your impact is and what your savings was quickly after the event may help get our members engaged and keep them engaged over time. So that's a basic summary of our peak time payback program, our demand response program, which really was quite similar to PG&E's Smart Rate. It's got some great benefits and some great future. But I also want to talk about, and have the opportunity here to talk about, another program which compares more with PG&E's battery program also. And so on the next slide, we're going to talk about Power Plus. And so while PTP is relatively simple and very low on investment, our Power Plus program is not. It uses the same event predicting tools, but is much larger in scale. Power Plus is a residential battery program that uses member-sited, that's behind the meter, Holy Cross-owned and Holy Cross-controlled batteries that respond to predicted events such as those targeted by peak time payback. Currently, the program provides for member resilience and peak shaving values, but it has more values that we'll talk about later. If you'll go to the next slide, please. I'm taking a pause because there's actually an awful lot on this slide that can be read. The program began with our first test site in 2020 and expanded to our membership in 2021. Those 5 test sites, and here it says test sites, those are actually member test sites. And those first 5, we called them kind of golden tickets, really set the stage for the rest of the program. Since 2021, we have now exceeded our original goal of 5 megawatts of distributed batteries under one control system, with each site averaging 4 or 5 kilowatt hour batteries. This equates to about 1,000 residential batteries today. The program was set up to pay the original cost of installation directly from Holy Cross to the installer. The member would then pay that back over time, and we set that time at 10 years, generally our warranty period, and the initial expectations of your battery. So they'll pay that back over time, less a rebate that we provided for against the original cost. It's applied monthly to their billing statement using that distributed energy resource service agreement I mentioned earlier. It's then going to be offset by the distribution flexibility tariff, which applied an identified value. So it's a value like peak time payback, but because it's such a larger impact at each battery of 5 kilowatts per month or per event, it's a larger value. In 2023, with the availability of the direct pay investment tax credit becoming available to cooperatives, the difference between the two, or what we consider that cost of resilience between the repayment and the benefit, that cost of resilience was as low as $15 a month. And that's to have batteries installed at your home, and you are able to have that resilience along with helping your entire community. So to maintain the resilience for the member and battery health, we do not discharge the battery more than 10 times per month. We use our forecasting tool to pick those best days or events because they're generally between 4 to 9 p.m. We also maintain a minimum state of charge. One of the great values of the batteries versus a thermostat or a smaller device is the visibility we do have into the actual response. It's not necessarily affected by the member's behavior. Unlike an aggregated thermostat program, which would be assigned the same value for a kW of demand reduction, these batteries are predictable, and due to the size of the system, on average 20 kilowatts each, it's more reliable and identifiable impact. So important to the Power Plus and any other direct control program is our DERMS platform. Being able to control the units all in a place is a must. Varying battery manufacturers is a benefit and allows for a wider reach. And the data obtained from the DERMS platform really enables us to make better decisions in the future. If you'll go to the next slide, please. As we reached our original goal of 5 megawatts and now have exceeded it in the program, we began to consider the lessons learned and thought about how to move forward. Our next and current iteration of the program began in 2025 and is called Power Plus Flex. Power Plus Flex has a few distinctions. It allows for a member-owned battery to enroll in the program. As our DERMS platform enrolls more vendors, we can manage more sites. It takes the burden off of Holy Cross Energy to own and maintain a battery sited in a member's home. And it does allow more flexibility for the member. A member can choose the level of enrollment. While Power Plus, Holy Cross might have installed a larger total capacity of batteries because of the economies of scale we saw. A member-owned site may have less space. They may install fewer units, but still want the extra banked resilience. Well, now they can choose to participate in our program with a varying enrollment capacity. Instead of Holy Cross controlling the entire battery and taking it down to a minimum state of charge of 20% to give them some resilience, a member can choose to enroll at a capacity of 50%, 75%, or more. This really allows us to gain more participations from members who might otherwise withhold their batteries for their own use. And finally, we've transitioned to a performance-based benefit instead of a static benefit, which allows Holy Cross to pay for exactly what value it gets from the batteries. And it does put some of the weight on the member to make sure their system is working properly. If you'll go to the next slide. I do want to apologize for an error on the slide. On the 3-year average annual benefit, it looks like we've got an extra 0 in there. Those member bill credits would be $435,000 versus the $440,000 in peak demand savings, which leaves us in the black by about $5,000 over the 3-year benefit. I do think these numbers speak for themselves. This program really is a success. We've met our goals. We've transitioned it from a what if to a pilot to a fully engaged program. We've recently enrolled 2 larger commercial sites and are working on bringing more manufacturers, including those with 3-phase systems, into the program. The program pays for itself. It's not a cross subsidy. It's not taking money from one member to pay for another member. It's really a self-sustaining program like our peak time payback demand response program. And I think that's really important going forward in today's environment. And these numbers, you know, where we're in the black, we've got a net savings. These really are based on only the peak shaving value, all of the costs, but just the single value. But this fleet, like virtual power plants, can really do so much more. If you'll go to the next slide. In the future, we really see programs like this being used for load shifting on a system-wide scale. We see benefits in utilizing them for grid flexibility and stability. We're seeing them dispersed all throughout our grids. We do have heat maps, which do show them concentrated in some areas, but we're working on opening them up to access all parts of our territory. We've already tested voltage regulation in some of our more remote areas of our grid within our fleet. That can be an added value. And in the future, how much value can actually be attributed to the batteries as non-wire alternatives to distribution system upgrades? It's something we're going to be studying and determining, can it be used for those options? So we're really excited to see how we can continue to utilize these distributed, flexible, and controllable assets to benefit the future of the electrical grid. And that's going to wrap up my comments if you want to move to the next slide. And that has our information on there.
Thanks, Ms. Reed. Appreciate it. I did have to second guess for a second if that was my garage with the unicorn floaties and mini bikes and battery, but it is not. I don't have dirt bikes.
I was in your garage. That was way too neat.
So true. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And want to see if we can have our panelists all come on. Ms. Bourget, I think we're done with the presentation for now, although may ask you to pull up a slide. Yeah.
Could I just ask one clarifying question for Holy Cross? What's your peak demand? So that 5 megawatts, is that like 2 or 3% of total peak that you've managed down?
Sam, I believe we're at 275 on a winter peaking period and less than half that in the summer.
Yeah, so it's about
5% in the summer, 2% in the winter.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Great, thanks. If I could ask our panelists to all come back on and excellent. Really appreciate, and before we even get started with questions, just wanted to really express our gratitude to each of you for taking the time to prepare and bring us this information. This is certainly an area changing quickly, and there's a lot to see in different parts of the country. So we really appreciate this opportunity to get better insights into some of the programs going on throughout the country, some right here in Colorado, so that we can keep a pulse on what is going on and how things are going in some of these leading programs. So really appreciate all of your efforts, both in deploying these programs, but also in taking the time to bring them to us here. So I'll start us out with one question, and then Chairman, maybe I'll go to you, and we'll go to Commissioner Plant and just kind of go round and round to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask some questions. Ms. Wong, my first question's for you, just in kind of semantics and understanding. With your smart rate, you had mentioned that the target is for the rate to be revenue neutral. And I was curious, is that within the whole apparatus of all the rate structures, or that tariff in particular for those customers should produce the same revenue as it would have otherwise?
Yes, with the new, so prior to, what was the credit methodology? In 2019, it was still 9 minimum events to 15 events on the maximum scale, but we would target the 12 events. The 12 events was what was revenue neutral prior to kind of all the program changes. So now with the new credit structure and charges structure, every event that we call is a revenue neutral event. A revenue neutral event, yeah.
Okay. Okay, got it. And then just curious, especially given that you give discounts for the other hours, even of that peak day. I forget what you call it, smart day, something like that.
Smart, yeah.
Okay. Do you see major snapback then? Because it's like as soon as the event ends, those people now have a discount going from like this massive disincentive to all of a sudden an
Yeah.
incentive to use right then. And curious if you're seeing snapback and if that's an issue and if you're looking at like program design to deal with that.
We do have some snapback that occurs. So we have a non-residential version of Smart Rate as well, same event hours, where we also are seeing snapback as well. But on the residential side, it's not as noticeable, but customers do wait until the 9 o'clock hour and then they start to use their energy again. Sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
No, I'm just wondering if 9 p.m. is now creeping up and you have to kind of keep modifying and iterating to now deal with a new peak, or it's not that bad.
I would say the latter. 9 o'clock is still our end of the peak window. We start to see load try to trend downwards. Is Megan? Okay.
Maybe Commissioner Gilman froze up there.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, do you have a question or you want to let Commissioner Plant go with one?
No, I'm good. I'll go and then turn it over to Commissioner Plant. First, thanks to all you guys for participating. Learned a lot and greatly appreciate it. So thank you for that. I guess we're just looking at very large demand increases in capital spending to support this on-peak demand. I mean, multi-billion-dollar investments, cumulatively, getting close to 500 to 1,000 megawatts of additional demand over the coming years. And just be curious about the panel's advice about how we scale quickly to play in that, hundreds of megawatts, billions of dollars of capital investments. Just is why I'm asking you, what percentage of peak demand it is and, how you got to 30% participation. So maybe I'll start with you, Amelia, and just, how do we scale without waiting 5 years to do this? Do we gotta be more aggressive, opt out instead of opt in? Do we have to combine it with rate structure? So just curious, any advice you have?
Yeah, I'll start. I think first and foremost, you probably need to assess what you currently have in your service territory. If you don't have the EVs to actually, if you don't have a significant EV population in your service territory, the managed charging
It's like
might not be for you.
125,000, we're being told in a low case.
Oh.
We're looking at demand over 500 megawatts by 2030 and a base case over 700 megawatts. That demand alone is causing $1.5 billion worth of capital spending. So you
got it.
Yeah, it's an opportunity and a problem.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why not only like we as the utility, but also our commissioners like managed charging so much is that it's it doesn't necessarily require infrastructure. It just requires behavior change. So it scales pretty easily. The thing is, you just need to engage with those EV drivers. You need to engage with the customers. And in my opinion, if you're getting to them a year or 2 or 3 after they've purchased their EV, the habits have kind of already set in. So you want to be engaging with those people early and often and really trying to encourage them in thinking from the jump, I should be charging my electric vehicle overnight. I think probably also you guys maybe have a little bit of an easier opportunity than we did with I would imagine you have a lot more single family homes than we do. So you will be able to also focus on those single family homes, enroll the like individual EV chargers. And I think that also would make the enrollment experience that much easier for the customer versus having to explain to them, actually, your vehicle has a telematics system that we connect to, and that's how we read all of the EV charging that you're doing. The one last thing I would say is if you need that scale and you also need that really firm kind of guarantee, I would consider active managed charging. That's where the utility is actually controlling when a customer is charging. The customer always has the option to opt out. So if they have to charge, they can always override that active managed charging piece. But I will say active managed charging we've seen from from the other utilities in New York State who have active managed charging offerings, that has been very effective in also shifting the load.
And is the reason you didn't do active managed charging because of the transient non-customer population?
And we saw a strong amount of response from passive, but we're open to active managed charging. We just haven't needed to at this point in time.
I know Stephanie, Lisa, Sam, Trevor, then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Plant.
I'm happy to add just a couple of thoughts. I think one, the incentive has to be high enough to make it meaningful. I think in terms of our scale, we had relatively aggressive incentives, which means the forecasting has to be good, the accuracy has to be good. Like you got to see the savings on the flip side of that, but that did allow us to have pretty high capacity incentives for our members. And so it made it kind of a win-win. A $50,000 battery system in your garage for $15 a month is hard to pass up, I think. We standardized a lot, especially early on. It was one battery, like one installer, had good installer relationships. So I think standardizing helped. We've been scaling over time now, which has been helpful too. Customer engagement as well, just what Amelia said, like when we send out tips, tricks, ways to keep them engaged and help them out, especially on the behavioral demand response side. And then in terms of scale for our experience, it was kind of interesting. We really launched a number of these programs, the Peak Time Payback, the Power Plus. We launched them right around the same time that we signed PPAs for our utility scale solar plus storage. And due to just challenges with utility scale storage and building those systems and getting them integrated in our power supply, the scaling actually happened much more quickly on the residential side because the systems, it's much more plug and play. So, and the behavioral demand response, you just have to get people enrolled. So we actually saw really fast scaling, reached our goals much more quickly. Now at this point, once the PPAs have come online, then it becomes more material part of our portfolio. But for a long time, the largest battery that we had in our fleet was an aggregation of utility scale batteries, aggregation of residential scale batteries, not utility.
I guess Stephanie or Trevor, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Plant.
I could just a couple of comments top of the head. I mean, we have, I think, 777,000 net metering customers. A lot of whom now have a 90% battery attachment rate. So, to Sam's comment, being able, for us right now, one of our key issues, Commissioner, is that our speed to power is a serious challenge, I think, which is what you're alluding to. We have folks that are going to have to wait a long time to be able to interconnect. And so being able to use what's already out on the grid and incentivize it, that inclusive of thinking not only historically how we've thought about deferral, but inclusive of how can this help us energize faster and utilize the grid more effectively. That's really a prime focus for us as we think about new programs. So here in California, one of our top issues is affordability and bringing our rates down, and being able to increase the denominator with more kilowatt hours is a really strong argument for being able to do that. So how do we use these behind the meter resources to really enable energization? And that's really where the fidelity of looking at the grid assets and being able to really assess what we can do with behind the meter resources to adjust for the need at the grid level. I don't know if that answers your question on scale, but it affects the way we think about the benefits of these resources.
Thank you. Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, thanks. Trevor, just to follow up on your presentation, are you with your battery and then also the smart panel program, are you dispatching the signals based on the distribution conditions? So based on individual feeder conditions going specifically to the customers that are on that feeder?
Yeah, exactly. So what we were doing is we would look at the feeder, forecast the feeder need, and create a shape for the aggregator to meet based on the feeder need. So we knew how much capacity the aggregator had behind each feeder. And based on that forecast that we would develop, we would then send them a shape at the feeder level. So they would shape the individual resources, third party would, but we would send them the shape we were requiring of them at that feeder. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, you aren't directly sort of connecting your DERMS communication with the ADMS system. You're doing sort of a general shape for each feeder, and then instead of having that sort of dynamic signaling from the ADMS system, you're doing more of a feeder shape sort of
Yeah.
predictable thing.
Yeah, it's a key question, and we thought about it, and because we were using these third-party owned assets for the batteries, we decided, this sort of third-party model. We, for this pilot, built a miniature DERMS and did not integrate it into our larger DERMS simply because this was a pilot, and that integration in and of itself would have taken a while. So, but you're right that yes, no, it wasn't integrated into ADMS, so our operators were not monitoring this. They could see it just by the impact that we had, but as I mentioned, that was very minimal given that we just don't have enough saturation of each of these DERs. Certainly, as things move forward, that level of control, or the question around control, is a big one. But I will say, I think one of our big takeaways here is if we can really deliver on that accuracy and precision, maybe the actual utility control is less valuable. So just trying to build out the inputs that we would use to make that determination.
And is that same process being used for the smart panel?
It is. Yeah. So the same signaling process was used. The only difference being that SPAN is the manufacturer and the customers are the owner of the panel. Whereas with the batteries, we were sending it to an aggregator that owned the batteries. And so that has different implications for the customer engagement, the end customer engagement. So SPAN smart panels, SPAN was sending, opt-in push notifications to these customers, and the customers were much more engaged. Whereas we really, for the battery customers, it was purely out of wanting to be transparent that they even needed to know about the program. So yeah, but we did use the same communication protocol with the panels as we did the batteries.
And on those lines, sorry, last question.
No.
On the span panels, did you guys look at the utility side stuff like a span edge kind of thing that plugs into the meter and all that sort of thing that you can control directly, or did that come out after the pilot basically
Yeah,
started?
we did not look at it for this pilot. There is an entire Epic. I mentioned this was funded by an Epic grant, and there's another Epic project that's doing exactly that with SPAN. So, yeah, great question. We wanted panels that were already out in the wild, and we wanted to see what level of load was on those panels. We actually found that a lot of the load, these were a lot of the cases of the SPAN customers was that the SPAN panel was a sub panel, and not all of the customer load was on the panel. So, um, like if they purchased an EV, they might have added the SPAN panel. Um, and so our ability to manage the whole home load was a bit diminished as a result. Um, but it's got very interesting implications for the technology, like where the technology could be focused. Whereas what you're describing, if we were to do this again in a year, once the edge panels are out there, we would be controlling the whole home load potentially there.
Yeah. Thank you.
And sorry, I said edge panels, edge meter colors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Plant. I got a couple questions for the Holy Cross crew. Just a couple kind of all around the participation in the peak time rebate and kind of implications there. So I think you've gone over, there's kind of a relative drop in maybe response per customer. And I'm trying to figure out how to interpret that if, especially given that so much of your response comes from large customers, is it that you're now bringing on kind of smaller, no offense, less meaningful, per customers, or are you getting less response from people already enrolled? And I was curious, do you have any insights as to which of those it is?
Yeah, great question. Lisa, I'm happy to take this one, but I think largely, Commissioner Gilman, it's related to adding more and more small residential customers. So early on with the program, we started just with a few key accounts on especially the larger commercial side. And then when we opened up the program, we've seen really good enrollment. I think people are happy to enroll in that. I mean, you can see at 3,500 members, that's getting close to 10% of our membership that's enrolled in this opt-in program, which is great because it's a no penalty program, so provides a good opportunity. So I think largely it's the residential focus, and we just haven't seen the same deep savings on the residential side. So that insight was really like, hey, let's go back, not excluding or forgetting about small residential, because I do think it's important, and they are still adding megawatts of response, but going back and focusing on those large commercial accounts that can have even a larger meaningful reduction. Like we said, Lisa said, we were really surprised something as simple as wastewater treatment plants shifting their pumping schedules around. They would almost go to zero during the times that we would call events, because our events are really narrow. It's not like a daily 4 or 5 hour TOU. It's, we'll ask for 2 hours a couple times a month. And so I think that allowed for those large commercial who have 24/7 operations staff, for example, that really allowed them to make changes, and they have people there that are able to control it. And I think it works well with those larger commercial as well, because they're not going to give up load control device to the utility. So the behavioral approach there works really well for the larger customers.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I was trying to figure out if we're seeing the existing enrollees kind of atrophy, or just you're adding less consequential customers. It sounds like the second.
Yeah.
And then curious, with the no penalty structure, do you think that, I guess, it's hard to say, you don't really have a counter counterfactual here, but you know, have you seen the results as being very reliable, or are there certain weather conditions or situations where it seems like people are just not responding and maybe the no penalty structure harms your predictability?
Yeah, we've seen the results be really reliable. It's one of the main arguments against a behavioral demand response program, right? Is like someone goes on vacation and they wouldn't have been using energy anyways, and you gave them a credit. All those different scenarios or weather patterns happen and they can't respond to one event, we pay them for others, and they don't actually meaningfully reduce the peak. So there's all of those arguments I think are valid. Our experience has been it's been consistent reduction for with the baseline calculation and with the opt-in and no penalty approach. So we've been happy with the program. We started at $1 per kilowatt hour and 50 cents per kilowatt hour, respectively, for critical and high events. And the program, for the reason of there's going to be calculation errors, there's going to be people that weather patterns that affect it. We're going to pay too much sometimes. We're going to miss the peak sometimes. And even despite all of that, the program has been so successful that we increased both of those rates by 50%. So we don't have a counter yet. I think we are interested in critical peak pricing, and that would allow us to run some kind of side-by-side comparisons. I'm sure we would see deeper savings on a critical peak pricing rate, just because there's the incentive of I'm going to pay if I don't respond. But we've been fairly surprised and happy with the results with the no penalty structure. It's worked better than I think it could have. So.
Okay, thanks. Just one more question along these lines, and then I'll hand it back to you, Chairman. So I think you had mentioned your main motivation here is to decrease your load, I think, on the coincident peak of your wholesale provider. So do you now have like a fairly predictable amount that you can almost bank on, by season you expect to reduce that coincident peak?
Yeah, we do. So on the peak time payback, you saw that average response of close to 2 megawatts. That's pretty consistent. We see that very often. And so I feel like we can bank on that. The Power Plus, Lisa highlighted a couple of the percent effectiveness rates. The teams worked really hard on that, making sure that the batteries work like they're supposed to and respond to dispatch signals. And we're well above 90% success rate. So, if we have 5.5 megawatts of batteries and we call on them, we get more than 5. So every time it's very consistent on the residential battery side. So we do feel like they're consistent. I think the hardest variable is the peak hour. It's not so much the response of our assets. It's more of we're trying to be narrow and strategic and not have people have to respond for 6 hours. Or if you dispatch a battery, we're dispatching them for just 2 hours to try to capture most of the value. That the Tesla Powerwalls are largely sized more to that 2.5 hour size. So that just allows for more savings when we can be really narrow with them.
Okay. Thanks. Chairman, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe for Trevor, you mentioned the span panels twice, and maybe a little bit for Sam. When I tried to install one in my house, not to get too personal, but it sounded like they had to, my entire electrical system had to be brought up to code, which it wasn't. So the electrician told me strongly not to do it. And I'm just curious if you're seeing barriers like that with code and just things like that are slowing you down or making it difficult, or did I just have a bad electrician or something? And I'd be curious, Sam, if you're seeing barriers like that up in Holy Cross. But Trevor?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm not the expert on this. As I mentioned, for this work, these were panels that were installed already. We didn't work very closely with customers who were installing panels. That being said, there's a whole team at PG&E working on that, and I'm happy to follow up with this team with some of the work that they've provided publicly, because I can answer that we're absolutely dealing with upgrade issues, and the cost to upgrade here is a huge barrier for customers, especially as they electrify. So we have lots of EV adoption. We have municipalities in the Bay Area that insisted, standardized bringing on electric appliances, and so bringing down costs for upgrade of panels or avoiding panel upgrade is a really key area of exploration on our team, on another part of our team. There are these epic projects working with Span, the meter caller, and working with other companies around transformer upgrades and how we avoid triggering transformer upgrades in neighborhoods. So everything from the home upgrade to the transformer upgrade. Like I say, I'm happy to share that with you because I've not been privy to all of that work, but it is something we're heavily focused on.
And I guess, Lisa, Sam, are you guys seeing barriers like that as customers electrify and, systems got to be brought up to code? And just curious if you have any guidance for us as regulators, sort of trying to manage through those issues.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I think we have similar barriers to everyone. If you try and electrify and your panel can't handle it, then that's tough. We have, in terms of the EV charging, if panel upgrades needed in order to support the EV charging, Lisa mentioned we do on-bill financing for that. We've included the panel upgrades in that cost to help with that barrier. And then we have some approved meter callers already that can help support interconnection of EV chargers as well without having to go to full panel upgrades. So kind of little things like that. I don't think we've seen any major barriers on the storage side. If anything, and if there's significant cost, then the installer will just work with the member and maybe not size the system as big. And do 2 or 3 batteries instead of 5, for example. So rather than paying the extra cost, barriers for storage, if there's transformer upgrades, we typically fund those if it's needed as a part of a new program enrollment like that.
Commissioner Plant, over to you.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for any of the EV managed charging. I know, Amelia, you were mainly talking about this, but I was wondering if the utility is kind of tied together in broader incentives with participation in the program beyond the performance incentives for direct participation. So, for example, EV incentives that the utility might be offering for purchasing an EV that would be tied to participation in a managed charging program, or incentives for chargers, or anything like that. Is there any kind of a cross program support that way, or is it just specifically one program outreach, sort of confined to that?
Yeah, good question. We do not currently offer incentives for electric vehicles for people to actually purchase electric vehicles. But we do take cross promotion across all of our programs very seriously. We have an entire other side of the house that focuses on infrastructure incentives. So while we also don't offer incentives for the EV chargers specifically, we do offer incentives to upgrade the capacity, whether on the customer side or the utility side, so that they have adequate power to install those EV chargers. So basically, once they're completed with that program, we try to immediately enroll them in our commercial managed charging program. And then we do offer incentives for, I mentioned previously, we offer incentives for load management technologies and energy storage if it's connected to the EV charger, and that does require participation in our commercial managed charging program. So if you're receiving incentives from us to be able to basically affect when you are charging your vehicles, you do have a requirement to participate in our commercial managed charging program. For the residential, it's really just the regular incentive program that we offer for managed charging.
Great, thanks. Any others?
I can speak to that in terms of our managed EV charging, even though we really didn't bring that up today. We do offer upfront incentives basically to pay for the chargers, assistance in installation, including rebates on commercial and fleet or multifamily, along with some infrastructure costs, expenses. So we do really help pay for the EV charger itself and do that more upfront instead of the back end incentive. We do have a managed charging. We are monitoring that. We are passive, like Amelia said, because at this time, our education of our members and our participation of our members in managing their chargers themselves they've really responded. It's really worked. We're not seeing the peak impact today that would trigger that active managed charging program. We are watching for it, and we are seeing that little after 9 p.m. kind of starting to inch up there into the potential of creating a second peak, though, as our members do come back online with their EV charging after.
And is that a separate EV tariff or?
No, it's just on a normal rate, and
Okay.
we've just found that they're managing it well. They're charging off peak, and they're not having the impact on our coincidental peak charges at this time.
Great, thanks.
Trying to prioritize my questions. Okay, maybe first, a quick one to Holy Cross. In your voluntary time of use, it's a 4-to-1 rate ratio, which is pretty aggressive, but it's a voluntary. I'm just curious, have you measured or do you have any kind of results of what you see as load shape changes on those voluntary participants in that 4-to-1 time of use program?
Yeah, to be honest, Commissioner Gilman, the sample size is so small on that. We don't have a lot of folks that are enrolled in that voluntary TOU. So we have not done a detailed load shaping analysis and how much can be reduced. I think anecdotally, we do see members, for example, that didn't want to go through our Power Plus program, but that might have batteries. They will enroll in the TOU in order to receive value there. And that's one of the reasons, as Lisa mentioned, our shift to that Power Plus Flex. If you have a battery already installed, you can enroll in that one and receive value through the Power Plus Flex instead of the TOU. So all of our incentives, similar to the on-peak period of TOU, the peak time payback and the Power Plus, those are all kind of targeted at those peak hours anyways. And yeah, we don't have a lot of data and a lot of members enrolled.
Okay. Thanks. Amelia, quick follow-up for you. Given that you're targeting the drivers directly who are not even necessarily Con Ed customers, how do you go about targeting them or knowing when they're buying a vehicle? Are dealers in the area and on this, the vehicle manufacturers, like how are you getting to them, as you said, right when they're purchasing the vehicle?
Yeah, we have a couple different ways. We have partnered with dealers before. We've also worked with our state agency called NYSERDA, who runs a drive clean rebate program, and they'll actually share the list of everybody who's applied for that rebate with us. So we'll be able to actually reach out to those folks to try to get them early in their overall electric vehicle journey. The other thing that we found to be extremely effective, especially because we have so many folks that are opportunistic chargers, meaning they're not charging at home, they're actually charging at public charging stations, is showing up and boothing at the public charging station. So you're going to be at a Tesla charging station. You have about 20 to 30 minutes of waiting around while you're charging. we might as well talk to you and see if we can get you enrolled in the program. So we've also found that to be very effective.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a smattering of questions. I was just gonna rapid fire to get through some of my list. Trevor, a question for you. You had mentioned how batteries can essentially kind of firm up other demand response programs, prolong or flatten, the response to those, especially those that might be time limited, like a thermostat program. And I was curious, and maybe you're not at this stage yet, but is there a way that you translate that into your resource planning so you're not looking like specifically at the impact of batteries or of the thermostat program? Like you're kind of talking about this combined approach where it firms those up, and I was just curious if that has translated into resource planning at all.
Yeah, great question. That's the dream. We are going down that path. We're not there yet. So as I think I mentioned, the next steps that we want to take is, the batteries have shown that they are good firmers of the shoulders. And now we really want to go out and show that we can orchestrate multiple resources at one time. There is an effort here at PG&E to look at how we integrate behind the meter resources into our distribution planning. And that's also an epic project. So it's beating a dead horse here, but the good news is that means it's public. And so it's our 4.08 epic project. And really trying to get at what your question is, Commissioner, is, once these resources, if you could go in as a planner and say, this is a solution, it's not a single resource. And the solution may involve the shaping of 3 or 4 DERs and 2 programs, but that orchestration is a solution. The planner can opt to use that solution. How does that impact resource procurement and potentially investment on the distribution grid? So that is a piece of the puzzle for us that we're observing now. And this work on the batteries and then hopefully very soon further orchestration should help feed that planning ecosystem further. But we don't currently use these orchestrations or identify these orchestrations for planning.
Thank you. Back to you, Junior.
Yeah, just to follow up on the time of use questions. There's a lot of curtailment of wind and solar in Colorado, maybe getting into the double digits. Have you guys ever looked at sort of super off-peak rates to encourage usage when there's otherwise curtailable wind and solar? And have you seen it be flexible, or so any guidance on something like that? I don't know, Amelia, Trevor, or Holy Cross, have you guys seen anything with super off-peak rates?
I'll just say we haven't, but that's an interesting concept. So yeah, haven't looked into it so far.
Lisa?
Oh, yep. At Holy Cross, we're not quite there yet either, but we're prepared for it with our green up tariff that we wrote. We did a little bit of testing. Our wholesale contracts really are not benefiting us to do that yet, nor do we have that real-time desk. But we see it as something in the future as potential.
Any advice for how to think about it from what you've seen?
Not yet. Don't know enough yet to be able to give some good advice, and hopefully Sam's nodding his head here and agreeing with me on that one.
I can touch on a little bit. I think one of the green up program that we structured is basically an incentive to use more. And so very similar to peak time payback, it's all baseline based. And if you use more than it, you get a credit, which effectively ends up being a super off peak rate. Because it would be a credit on top of, like if you're on the TOU rate and got a credit on top of what's a 6 cent off-peak rate could get a 4-cent credit and have effectively like a 2-cent rate. One of the challenges, one, we just don't have enough oversupply right now to make it worth it. In our modeling, though, when we do have oversupply, it's likely to be longer duration events, so 8-10 hours. And even if you give a 4-cent energy credit, it's just not a high enough value to drive a lot of behavior. When you're talking about our peak time payback, if you reduce, you get $1.50. It's a really big value driver that can change behavior, and the super off peak is small enough that I think that'd be our only hesitation is can it drive behavior, and is the cost of curtailment high enough to make people change their behavior when we're already struggling with $1.50 to get them to do what we'd like. So that'd be the challenge there, but I think we're always looking at new rates and ideas, and that's obviously the holy grail is to have a dynamic rate with critical peak pricing and some super off peak and other hours, and have it be more dynamic. And hopefully if people can't respond, maybe devices can in the future. So we'll keep our eye on it.
I mean, we're looking at compensable PTC damages for curtailed wind. So, we'd pay people to charge maybe during off-peak. Have you guys seen anything like an EV specific tariff for residential customers where, for customers that use in any peak demand period more than 2 or 2.5 or 3 kW, they could be, a separate tariff or time of use rate in addition to the standard one. So sort of, maybe an opt-out EV rate. Just curious if you guys have seen anything like that where you could maybe be more aggressive than what you can be on a TOU rate for everybody. So I don't know, Amelia, have you seen time of use rates with like 2 to 3 kilowatt thresholds or something like that? So it'd be sort of targeted towards EV customers.
We do have a residential time of use rate that EV owners can use. You don't have to be an EV owner to be on it. It's just our time of use rate. And I don't believe there's any kind of threshold on like EV usage in order to be eligible for that rate. We've seen that because you can either only participate on the EV time of use rate or participate in the Smart Charge New York program, participants basically have to make a choice. We've seen a lot more participation in our program versus the rate. I think what people like is seeing those off-bill payments that I mentioned before. I think we have a couple thousand right now enrolled on like who own EVs that are on the time of use rate.
Lisa, Sam, Trevor, any guidance on sort of trying to tailor something specifically for EV owners with a minimum threshold, or is that something you guys haven't seen?
PG&E does have, similar to what Amelia was commenting on, it's an electrification rate, so super peak and super off peak, but no restrictions on volumetric restrictions. And I believe.
Did you say PG&E does have a super off peak and yeah,
it's the ETOU rate. So yeah, very, very low super off peak values. I do understand that there's an effort to shift charging to midday as opposed to night. And so thinking about how that should be reflected in that rate. But it is, again, I think similar to what Amelia was saying, not a requirement for EV users. And we generally find that EV users are charging, off peak as is, even when they're not on this rate. it is a well used rate, but it is not required for EV owners. There was a point where, and I don't believe that's still the case, but if you were on that rate and you showed that you purchased an EV, you would get a small rebate on your EV for being on the ETO rate. I think that has expired though.
Sam, did you have guidance?
Yeah, we don't currently have any rates that are specific to EVs. And I can't speak too well about any others that I'm aware of that would have kind of that threshold based on identifying if you're an EV or not, and you can get a higher or get a lower rate or a higher incentive. We just, to be honest, we've been surprised. I do think we have a pretty high penetration of EVs in our service territory just based on the demographics, and our teams have been really successful with enrolling people in our program, even though it technically has the right to direct load control. Through the enrollment process, just asking people, we have good one-on-one touch points with members, and we ask them, hey, would you mind scheduling this outside of our 4 to 9 p.m. peak? And they do it. And so we just don't, at this point, we don't see a need for direct load control or a specific EV rate. Certainly we might, but we're talking kilowatts, not even megawatts of on-peak usage at this point, based on members actually just shifting on our request, which has been surprising to see, but also helpful.
Commissioner Plant?
I
Yeah,
know,
just-
I just wanted to quickly pop in. I know we're talking mostly about residential, but if you're interested at all in talking about commercial, we do have like an EV phase-in rate for commercial sites that are operating EV chargers. So basically, it's like a graduating tiers to encourage people to utilize their EV chargers, but it's more geared towards commercial station operators as opposed to EV drivers. I'm not sure if you're interested in that.
Yeah, and how's that rate structured? Is that like super on peak, super off peak, or
It's
is
basically
it demand charge?
It's demand charge. So there's basically tiers depending on your load factor. And as you graduate through the tiers of the load factor, your demand charges start to increase until you're above 25% load factor. And then you graduate out of the phase-in rate onto our regular service classification rate of SC9. So that was launched in last October. But again, that's not focused on residential EV chargers. That's focused on like the folks that are actually operating these commercial EV chargers.
Quick follow-up on
Thanks.
that. Did you find that the rate changes for the public? I think we had some differing rates like that on our commercial chargers, our public chargers, but it was just basically people would still get a flat rate and it would just be higher.
You're saying, like, are they changing?
Yeah, is the signal getting to the people who are charging?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we didn't specify any requirements for them to lower the rate that goes to the customer. So, I mean, one would hope that they would lower their rate as they and so the savings would pass on to the customer, but that wasn't a requirement of the EV phase-in rate.
Yeah. I had a quick question for Holy Cross, and you were talking a little bit about how you're winter peaking. Do you have a active sort of like a heat pump control load program, or is that pretty much you're trying to do it all through the batteries, or how is that working in your service territory?
I'll take that. We are not currently controlling heat pumps. We are looking at that. We're looking at some meter disaggregation to determine what the best load to control is next. You could go anywhere from batteries to thermostats, and we've just got to find the right load in between. We're very tentative on that because, like an EV charger, we're affecting a member versus their own behavioral, where the batteries were so little impact to our members. because of our great reliability. It's being considered, but today, no.
Thanks. And Trevor, for you, quick question. You showed, I think, over time, sort of the battery participation sort of waning, and then it would increase when you increased enrollment, and then it would kind of wane again in one of those graphs. And I was wondering, was that did you find that that was associated with just a certain number of events that people are called on and they get kind of a saturation point, or what did you attribute that waning of participation to any specific thing?
Yeah, so I want to be careful here because I believe the one you're referring to was that they were not meeting the dispatch signal.
Right.
Yeah, so in that case, the participation is maintained the same. It's all the same batteries and customers participating in that aggregation of resources. The drop off of the dispatch that we see there could be a result of a few factors. For example, if the dispatch is really long and those batteries are simply running out of energy, that's the primary cause. The other thing is the algorithm, because think of this as a pool of batteries. Let's say in the one you're referring to, that might have been 13 to 20 batteries. That's a small pool of batteries, and the way they've built these algorithms, these are new softwares that have been built with our partners that we've worked with on this, and they simply are improving how to spread out the battery behavior across the dispatch. And that's why I was mentioning the more batteries we have, the more effective we are, because it's harder and harder to spread out that dispatch with fewer batteries.
Yeah, particularly if you're going for multiple hours, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that really goes to the kind of the planning question, because historically DR we're planning for shorter windows of dispatch, but what we were looking at here is we have feeders that have multiple hours, like the one I showed you, of overload. Is that something we can address with behind the meter resources? And so therein lies the challenge of meeting those long dispatch hours. And we did do lots of long dispatches over this summer, and generally they responded well, except for in those cases where there were fewer batteries.
Right. Thank you.
Well, excellent. I just wanted to again thank you all so much. Thank Ms. Bourget. Chairman, did you have something, or you're gonna? Okay, good. For helping us set this up. Just really appreciate all of your time this afternoon, but also that went into preparing the information and data to come share with us in some cases for the first time, hot off the presses. Information and data, and just really express our gratitude. Here in Colorado, I think there is so much power in, really collectively understanding the opportunity here and what these programs could look like and the value they could bring to all of our customers. And it's really valuable to us to learn from all of you. And hopefully there are many other things going on here in Colorado, and we can share the favor back and really just collectively do the best job we can for our customers out there. So with that, turn it over to you, Chairman, for any closing remarks.
No, just echo your thanks. Learned a lot. Appreciate the conversation and look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Commissioner Plant?
Yep, I'd say thank you as well. This was really interesting. I appreciate the input.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. And I think we actually originally had this only go to 3 p.m., but we correctly identified that it would take a little longer to get to the bottom of all the questions we would have for you all and to share all of that knowledge. So really appreciate you all putting in the time to spend with us, and appreciate it very much. And hope you all have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.